So, Daredevil Born Again has just come out, the first two episodes. I watched them back to back, but I'm going to do separate videos for each episode. This video is just going to focus on the first episode because my opinions on the first episode and the second episode are radically different. So, I think tonally will make more sense. So, for the first episode, personally, I don't think the first episode worked. It wasn't a disaster, but it had a lot of problems. It opened very strangely. The pacing was all over the place. The tone was all over the place. Its identity was all over the place. Like, it clearly both wants to be season 4 of Netflix's Daredevil, but also at the same time, it's like, no, we're very different too. It's like it wants its cake and eats it too, and having feet in like both worlds is kind of doing it no favors. At least in this episode, tonally it was off, very off. It feels posturing. That's what this episode felt. It was like a lot of posturing. It's like we're this, we're that. Like, oh, we're dark and gruesome, just like you like it. And I'm like, yeah, it's dark. It's dark. It's gruesome. Look, we killed this guy. We did this. We got blood. We got the characters and everything. I don't know. Side note, the dialogue is definitely different than Netflix's version. You can tell it was written by someone else. I'm trying to put into words what about it is different. I'm not saying it's bad that it's different. I'm just saying that it is different. It feels dumbed down. It doesn't ruin it, but you can definitely tell that it's just, or maybe it's just me, like writer brain me is like, someone else wrote that. It's not the same author. The rhythm of the dialogue is just different. I'm not saying it's bad. It's another just thing of like, this is its own thing. You aren't season 4 of Netflix's Daredevil. You aren't. I can tell. So, just own up to that. But the biggest blow to its own identity is that it assumes its audience has seen previous media, like Netflix's Daredevil and the Hawkeye show. Because of that, it does a very bad job of establishing who anyone is, where we are, anything about that. It's like, who are these characters? Who are this? It just kind of assumes because it assumes it's season 4 of a show and not season 1. Like, tonally, it's like, okay, here are all these characters and this and you're like, but who are these people? I know who these people are, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You need to establish your setting, you need to establish your characters, because otherwise it just kind of feels like you're like, oh look, we have the characters here, the same one. It's like for the fans, yeah, but the fans want to be brought back into that world. You can't just throw them in after years. You got to settle them in. So at the beginning, it's like Murdoch and Foggy and Karen are kind of going into, I guess, a retirement party at a bar, I think. And they throw like a bunch of different characters at you and don't really explain who anyone is. Like, through context, you're like, okay, these guys are lawyers, maybe? Like, I know they're lawyers, but the story doesn't explain that very well. It's just kind of like they just throw you there. It's like, why do we care about this? Why do we care about this relation? Why this? The answer is, oh, because you watched the original show. But what if you didn't? Or even if you did, you need to be reminded. You gotta earn your audience. They didn't earn it yet. I mean, the opening is both too slow and too fast. It starts, there's like, okay, there's this lawyer lady who is talking to Foggy, and then there's this guy who's retiring from the police chief, and then there's this other lady maybe, and there's like all this happening, and you don't really know anyone, and they're just kind of talking, and they're talking, and you're like, you're not really sure where you are, who anyone is. Nothing is really set up. It's just kind of a bunch of fun, jokey conversations. Look, comedy, da-da-da. We're friends having fun. And then suddenly action, da-da-da. Have we set up who these people are, what the stakes are? Nope. Action, death, action, sadness. There's some good visual shots. It sometimes almost lingered too much on them, where the shots were so visually striking. They're like, oh, let's focus on that. And you're like, kind of takes you out of the story a little bit. Some of the music choices, very strange. Like, or I should say, super on the nose to the point of it being strange, where it takes you out. Like the songs that they sprinkled throughout, I don't think that was a good choice. Really took me out of the story of being like, oh my god. The story, and it felt a little so dramatic that you're kind of like, it had that tone. I just tonally, I'm saying the tone of the show was off. So weird. It lacked identity. It didn't know what it was. It both wants to be the sequel to all of these shows and wants to be the same, but also wants to be like, hey, no, we're going to be completely different. We're going to get rid of all these characters and we're going to change up all these things. You need to establish yourself. You do. The show feels like a new coworker that's trying to fit in, but instead of establishing itself and saying like, hey, my name is this, is pretending to be like the previous coworker and is kind of like, yeah, I'm fine. It's the same. It's okay. Establish who you are. Just establish it. Establish what the story is, who these people are. Explain. But it does none of that. Very strange opening. My big problem is it doesn't feel rooted. The flow is very disjointed. It felt like a writer who had no idea how to start the story. And like they had a story, but they really didn't know how to introduce these things. So they just kind of did a salad of scenes and just called it a day. I'm not discounting the show because I did see the second one and I felt the second one did not have this problem where it felt a lot more rooted and clear. It's not terrible. I need to preface it this all, but it's not terrible. It's not like bad or anything. It's just strange. It feels off. I don't know. Now I'm gonna go into spoilers. So they at the opening they're just kind of slow. They're just talking in this thing, and they're introducing these people. There's this guy that's retiring from the police force. Maybe there's this other lawyer chick who's talking to Foggy. And then Foggy's like has a client that he's hiding, but then he gets shot, and then there's action. So the fight scene was fine, but it was with Bullseye, which all the fans have been really excited about. This is another example of like trying to pander to the audience without earning it, where they're just like, okay, you've been excited for Daredevil versus Bullseye because that was clearly what was supposed to happen in season 4 before it got canceled. So here you go. Here's the fight right now at the beginning. Get that out of the way. And it's just like, but it wasn't built up. It wasn't earned. It just sort of happens out of nowhere. And then they have this fight. They don't explain who this guy is, right? The awesomeness of like, oh, this is Bullseye. This is all his. No explanation. It's just like he's there. They're having the fight. And then Foggy dies with a heartbeat. The heartbeat thing was cool. I think one of the strengths of this version is they do a pretty good job of playing around with the audio where you hear things from far away as if you're Daredevil all the time. They have a risk of overusing that effect, but it is cool, and I think I definitely see why they might be overusing it, but I like it. And in that moment, it was cool hearing his heartbeat while this fight is happening, and is a very good audio representation of where Matt's mind is at. Is like, Foggy's dying, I'm fighting. That was cool. I thought that was well done. And then Foggy died. Let's see how long that lasts, first of all. Second of all, too soon for that to happen. They did not establish who Foggy was. Barely. It's like, okay, this is this guy's friend, and then he's dead. I know who he is. There's a lot of background in the show, but this isn't Netflix's Daredevil. You need to remind people, like, this personality, who are these characters? It's like, and they're like, yeah, they had a conversation, like one conversation before this happened, that was very jokey and like, oh, look, they're friends, yada, yada, yada. I mean, it's practically trying to wink at the camera, like, look, we have the characters, look, we have Bullseye, look, this. But at the same time, the Bullseye fight is over. Foggy is dead. Karen is moving to San Francisco. It's just like, it was more like, yes, we're the same, but actually we're not at all. So, like, again, pick one. You either, like, you brought all these actors back, you got people hyped for that, and then you threw it away. It felt like they didn't want the fans to complain that they weren't doing the story that they wanted, so they very rushed quickly, had the Bullseye fight, so that fans would get what they wanted. and they'd show Foggy, show Karen, get what they wanted, and then do their own thing. That's what it felt like. But I'm like, that's not gonna win you any favors doing it that way. At least I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're gonna bring that back and Poindexter's gonna get out of prison and then they're gonna have a proper fight. I don't know. It felt like rushed. It felt super rushed. It's like they're trying to garner goodwill, but achieving the opposite. I think it was a mistake to do it that way, but that's just as me. It rubbed me the wrong way. And then Matt tried to kill Bullseye. That, oh my god, that pissed me off so much. He threw him off a building and through an act of God didn't kill him, which I knew had to be the case because making Daredevil kill is like having Batman pull out a gun. It's almost exactly like that. That is a big choice. And I'm not saying it's a wrong choice with like the Foggy dying, it like flow that makes sense, but within the context of the show, within the first 10 minutes, they have yet. That's a good point. I just realized they haven't set up within the context of this show that Daredevil doesn't kill, that Daredevil is, religious. They did not set up any of that before he tried to kill Poindexter. It just hit me that's so critical information. Him giving up being Daredevil and all of that, which is what happens after Foggy Nelson dies, you don't understand why unless you've explained that this is a line of his that he tried to cross, and through weird miracle the guy didn't die. He threw him a couple stories and he just was fine, and he's walking again too. I don't know how that's possible. There's no explanation. There's no explanation to this. He tried to kill a guy, and then you don't see him explaining. They skip over that. They skip over him realizing I tried to kill someone, which is a big line for him personally, and then him giving it up. That happens off screen in this year gap. It's 1 year later. Which is so disjointed. You don't even see the funeral of Foggy. You don't see anything. It's so strange. It's kind of like this. It's an opening to explain the status quo that they have decided to do for their show. But that opening is needs its own opening. They need to establish what the baseline is for this character. Who is this guy? He's blind. You can figure that out through the glasses and the cane. He's also a lawyer. You kind of figure that out because his friend is a lawyer and he mentions that, but they don't establish that really until later. Then he suddenly becomes Daredevil to try to help his friend, and they didn't establish that either. I mean, this because you clicked on a Daredevil show, but just the way it comes out of nowhere, it's assuming the audience knows everything already, which is a level of confidence that is hilarious because the tone feels so unconfident. The writing feels both super confident in itself and super unconfident of itself at the same time. It's super confident that the audience knows everything already, but super unconfident in its own tone and its own decisions. Weird. It's so weird. I'm gonna be honest. I actually thought that the opening might have been a dream sequence because of how disjointed and weird it was. And Foggy died, and you're like, is Foggy really dead? And he killed someone because he threw someone off a building. That's not Daredevil. What the hell? And then he takes off his mask, and this guy sees him, and I'm like, okay, this is her dream sequence? This is everything is happening? But no, it's real. Foggy is dead. Probably not, but let's pretend that we think he's dead. And he did try to kill someone, but it didn't work. The guy's just alive. And then the guy who saw him ends up working for him and is like a friend. Okay. It's not a dream sequence, which I'm glad about because that would have been pretty cheap, but also it's just that opening, man. And Karen isn't dead, but she went off to San Francisco so that they didn't have to, pay the actress or something. Oh my god. If you want to do that, fine, but they had to have an extra scene of him begging her to stay or something, and that scene, oh my god. They make her seem like such what a terrible friend. Oh my God. Went off to San Francisco, hasn't called after the friend has died, and then blames him for it? I mean, it's such a weird choice to write her that way. I don't know. And the way he responded felt very weird. I didn't like the way they did that. If you want her to take stage left out of the story, fine. But that scene just painted it in such a negative and bad way. I don't know. I would hope that a friend of mine didn't do that. I don't know. It was weird. That opening, man. I did not garner goodwill for me. Maybe other people were really hyped, but I thought just structurally really strange. Didn't work. The structure of the whole episode was so strange, very disjointed. Like scenes, there was no flow to that episode at all. There was just scenes happening, and the narrative through line was never addressed. No one was set up. No one this is like, okay, here's a scene. Okay, they're talking, then we're gonna have this scene, we're gonna have this scene. Okay, now we're introducing Fisk, and we're gonna have this Fisk scene, and now we're gonna go back here. No flow at all. Fisk, I mean, it was fine, except they don't introduce who he is or set up what is that. Okay, he's like, okay, he's a criminal guy or this, that. You have to have seen previous things. It's like demanding you to have done homework to understand the show, which is not friendly to people who are trying to get into it. Like anyone who wants to get into it, they can't. I think that's a mistake. Fine to draw from that, but when you draw from it, you also have to establish it in your own show. You're like, okay, draw from Fisk. Draw from what you've done here. That's great. Fisk is great. But establish who he is. Establish his relationship with his wife. Explain what's happened to him. Clearly, his wife is in a business meeting, and then he shows up, and they've clearly been apart. I didn't see the Hawkeye show. I assume that this is very explained in the Hawkeye show. But I haven't seen the Hawkeye show, so I have no idea like what happened or this. You can figure out through context clues that he got shot and that he was in recovery and they were separate for a long time because of that. That's what I gather, but it's not clear. The information that I'm gathering does not feel like it's there for the audience. It's just me piecing things together. It doesn't flow. So Fisk is like running for mayor of New York. That part of it is kind of fun, and Matt's upset about it. Here's another thing. They don't really explain their relationship at all. Now, I know it because their relationship is clearly defined in the Netflix show, but they kind of like, oh, they have history, but they don't grasp at, they don't imply anything about that history at all. And so you just are like left scrambling about what's happening. I know, but you gotta tell people because it feels weird. God, it feels like we're watching movie 5 of something. It's weird. So near the end, Fisk and Matt have a meetup in the diner, which you've all seen in the trailers. I like the scene a lot. Big problem with it was just that almost the entirety of it was in the trailer. So that didn't bode well. Actually, almost the entirety of the trailer seems to be from the first 2 episodes, which concerns me. Like, would it be spoilery to see more of it, or is it really that the best you have is in the first 2 episodes? That's concerning to me. I hope it's just because spoilers and they're trying to hide what happens in the later half, but almost all the dialogue that you see in the trailer is in the first 2 episodes, which might be a great thing. I don't know, but it concerns me. Anyway, yeah, I like the diner scene. I feel like I'd already seen it because the majority of it was in the trailers. The new information you get from the diner scene is kind of their threats to each other, where if Fisk gets out of line, Matt intends to step in as Daredevil, and Fisk is like, I'm not going to tolerate vigilantes anymore when I'm mayor, so if you ever go back to vigilante nonsense, I'll go on top of you. So that there's kind of an interplay there of that both of them are trying to be civilized and control these darker halves of themselves, and they're both at the same time. I like that because they're both going to fail. That'll be fun to see. They set up that well, where you kind of understand the stakes between those characters. At that point, you understand their relationship. Prior to that, the story doesn't really give any explanation of what their relationship is, but at that point, the stakes are clear of what these two characters are, how they're going to be pit against each other or not, and how it works. I like that. The diner scene's good. Fisk is good. I mean, Fisk is great. The acting's great. Fisk is great. Matt's great. I enjoy their dynamic. I'm gonna write the first episode off as the writer just not being sure how to introduce the story, because I've seen the second one. I'll talk about the second one in the next video. But the second one doesn't have this problem. Like it feels grounded in itself. It has a sense of place. It has a sense of characters. It's not as disjointed. Like the scenes flow into one another, and there's a story it's trying to tell. That the issues that I am saying at least seem to be only this episode, or so far only this episode. I just wanted to talk about it because it is very instructive. The importance of your opening and importance of grounding your audience in the world that you're setting up. The importance of establishing your location, your place, your characters, so important. Even if the audience knows it's so important. Because I know, and yet I felt like I was just thrown in and not eased in. You need to establish who these characters are. You need to establish all of the aspects of them that is critical to understand the story. So the fact that he doesn't believe in killing, very important to establish. Like, because of that's a huge part of all of this. Doesn't believe in killing. He's blind. He's this. He's that. He's a lawyer. He's given up this. You gotta establish the story. It's driving me crazy. Oh my god. I think this is a very good writing lesson, though. I'm very happy I saw this. Anyway, that's all I have to say about the first episode. That's my feeling of it. Subscribe to be notified when I release my review of the second one, which should come out in a couple days. New chapter of Bone Song is up on Patreon for those who are following. Reminder to everyone that the first 10 chapters are free. You don't even have to become a member on Patreon to read them. The new chapter is up now. So you have a great day, guys. Enjoy reading, and I will see you soon.